I thought were useful to a community like this, and I thought we could, have that conversation and also extend it and just basically talk about mental health. So I mean, just to kick us off, what is mental health and what isn't mental health?
Okay. I know there's probably some technical definition of mental health. But I like to think of, for me, when trying to make sense of a concept, I try to think of it in a way that is most practical in my day-to-day life. If someone asked me, what is kidney health, for example, or if I asked you, what is kidney health, what would you think? Besides thinking, what a strange question, right? Right? What is kidney health, right? What if I asked you, what is cardiac health? You'd think, what does that even mean? That's actually how I feel when people ask, what is mental health? Because it's an odd question. I think there is only one concept of health, which is that the whole person is in a state of well-being. Every part of the person's body is functioning as it should, and you're living the kind of life that you find to be productive for you. Part of the problem is that when we had come up with, or most times when we think about the concept of health, we somehow exclude everything from here up. And there's a long history to why we do that. And so here we are in 2025, and we still think of the functioning of one of the most important organs in the body, the brain, and the health of that organ in the brain as somewhat separate to be considered from the rest of the body. So we have health and we have mental health. That's where we are now. My hope is that in a very short time, we will get rid of this concept and talk about health in general, and come to appreciate that the functioning of the brain is an essential part of general health. And health is one concept, it's health. But for now, since we're not there yet, mental health is the well-being of from here up.
Does that make sense? There was only 2 people that said they hadn't eaten, but you guys all are behaving like you're not eating.
Sorry, or did you guys want me to give you something you can write down and quote somewhere else? No, because I would have to Google it, honestly. I'm not good at all those bookish definitions. So if you want me to Google something and give you, I'll do that.
Okay.
Oh, it's fine. Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, so one of the things, and this is not one of the questions. One of the things that you talked about, at your last talk, which I thought would be useful, just as you were, defining that, was to talk a little more about the new law, why it's important, and where we were before coming here. For context, Kaduna State just signed a new law, and I'll let him talk about it.
So Kaduna State is one of 3 states that has domesticated the National Mental Health Bill. Some of you may have heard about it. I think that bill was was passed in 2023. Before that time, does anyone want to guess the last time that of passing laws in colonial times had to do with maintaining control and order and keeping safe the colonialists? So when someone developed a mental illness, they needed a legal basis to do whatever it is that they needed to do with that person. Of course, most of these laws didn't apply to the British because they had their ways of managing these types of situations. Now, what are some of the things that were allowed under the lunacy law? Has anyone ever been to a psychiatric hospital? I think this is a safe space. I'm assuming.
It is. It is.
Is this one of those safe spaces? Has anyone here ever been to a? Of course, not you. I know none of us here has ever had. I mean, maybe you escorted someone, or you went there for an outreach, or you went to fix their laptops. Anyone? No, wow. You guys are missing. Good. So one of the oldest psychiatric hospitals in Nigeria, which at the time was simply referred to as a lunatic asylum. If I called you a lunatic now, how would you feel? But that was actually what the law called people with mental illnesses. So if you went to a lunatic asylum, which Yaba Psychiatric was one of the first lunatic asylums set up in the country then, and if you go to Yaba Psychiatric now, not much has changed. Yes, popularly known as Yaba Left, exactly. Also, you people didn't know that the left stood for psychiatric. That name comes from when you get to the junction. If you turn left, the psychiatric hospital is there. If you go right, you go towards the other side. So that's why it's a coded name. Now, what you have is, you have bars, like these types of bars, from the floor all the way up to the ceiling. Then you had bars in the ceilings, preventing people from absconding out. And you have a nursing station in every ward. So if you've been to a hospital, you have nurses where they could keep an eye on the patients, right? Now, the nursing station in the lunatic asylum would be here, where we are, and then the bar would be right behind us, all the way up, and the patients will be in there, behind the bar, so that we, the nurses, would be safe from them. So, can anyone begin to picture what getting well from a mental illness would look like if you were brought into a facility, put into a cage, and the people who were supposed to care for you would only climb into the cage when it was time to give you medications, essentially to sedate you, and then sit here, and then you're in there with a whole bunch of other people who are unwell, unsupervised, and just hoping to get out of here. We, in front of the bar, were typically either British or the people who were trained by the British. When they left, we took over this system and we maintained it. Now, let me say something really quick. The Federal Neuropsychiatric Hospital here in Banna was one of the first psychiatric hospitals in Nigeria to stop that practice. So you would not find any bars in the hospital, and the nursing station is within where the patients are. There's no division. So don't worry. I don't know why it's taking Yaba time to get rid of it, but at least here in Banna, you don't find things like that. So those were some of the laws and practices: the chaining of people on the bed, the beating of patients, the idea. A lot of the things that we see in movies, a lot of the things that we even think in our head when we talk about mental illnesses, come from those laws, come from what the laws allowed or defined mental illness as. So, for example, who here knows that when you're taken to a psychiatric hospital and you say you are not mad, it means that they will keep you for longer, Abi? It means that you are madder than mad. Good. That was actually part of the law. Once you were accused of being a lunatic, you'd go in there, and then you had to convince the staff that you are not a lunatic. So maybe you and your co-wife or someone have an argument or have a fight, they'll say, you have gone, and then in there. And the more you say, no, it is that evil woman that is locking me in here, the longer you will stay there, till you just agree, yes, I'm mad. Take the medicine, be calm, behave yourself, stay with other mad people, enjoy madness for a little bit. After a month or two, you can now come out, and then you say, Wallahi, I have seen something. So it's crazy, if I can use that word, that we allowed that law to guide a clinical practice all the way to 2023. Now, the federal government has passed it, and the federal government owns the psychiatric institutions in Nigeria, most of the popular ones. And there are about 11 or 12 of them. We have 36 states. So let's go through this together. Banawa Psychiatric serves the 8 states in the region. So a population of about 30 to 40 million people, that's the psychiatric facility that cares for them. Right? Or you didn't realize this? Okay, yes, so that's where you go if you're in this region with a psychiatric problem. Because how many of you have ever thought you have a mental health problem and gone to a PHC to complain? How many of you would try that? How many of you would go to a general hospital to complain? You know the only place to go is there, right? So let me put it in context. That hospital sees 6,000 patients at their outpatient unit in a month. 6,000 patients in their outpatient clinic in a month, because that's the only place where if you just wanted to check if you are normal or you are not normal, you would have to go queue up and wait with all the other people with that question in the 8 states to receive the service. Does this make sense to you guys? Does it? So what the mental health bill did was it called for states to domesticate it. And when states domesticate the bill, they become responsible for integrating mental health care into the general hospitals and the primary health care. So the healthcare systems that states control must integrate mental health services into them. So that's one of the first things that any state that domesticates the bill is supposed to do that. So we've domesticated the bill and we're doing that. All right? Obviously, the bill outlaws a lot of all these practices, the chaining, the beating, and it doesn't just outlaw them, it makes them like an offense where the person can be arrested, charged, and imprisoned for doing that to someone else. Another thing the bill does is, just like when we were in the thick of the HIV epidemic, one of the things that the law did was it made it criminal for you to deny someone a job or terminate a person's job solely on their HIV status. The mental health bill does same. You cannot, solely on the basis of a person's mental health condition. Now, again, stay with me here. If the person is obviously psychotic, you can't give them a job. But you cannot, because they have a history of a mental illness, deny solely on the basis of that, deny a person a job or terminate them from a job. Now, what if I said, Pablo is crazy, we need to lock him up? Right? The law now brings up the law now brings up a process where for him to be committed past a period of 48 hours will require a review by 2 independent consultant psychiatrists. So if he insists after 48 hours that he is not crazy, the institution that is holding him must bring 2 independent consultant psychiatrists to review him and submit a report. If their report is incoherent, that, okay, he's actually normal, he has to be discharged. It is only where they agree that, okay, this guy is not okay and requires this, that he would be kept in that facility. Any facility that keeps you beyond that without that review is liable to face charges, to face penalties, and our agency can even go and shut them down. So if it happens to you while you're in the facility, just wait. At least now you know me. Don't fight, don't do anything that they will use as evidence that you are not well. When you come out, just call me and we'll go and sort it out. But whatever money you collect, remember who helped you, Sha. Okay. But that's so these are some of the things that the bill does. It makes mental health a lot more accessible as it should be in general. And it does away with some of those practices that made no sense in the first place.
So thank you. I think the bill itself is lovely, and I mean, I'm happy and proud that Kaduna State is one of the states. Just before we go on, like, as you describe these things and I look at like everybody's faces, like the impression I get just from their faces, and I'm not a face reader, but is that, you know, mental health is something that is, you know, it's far away. And then the other day you made mention of, you gave like stats of how many in 10 people, and I just want you to ask those questions and, you know, let's get a reaction.
Okay, so let's talk about statistics. It's easier for me to just read off the statistics, right? There's WHO, for example, has a unit for something called non-communicable diseases. So we have infectious diseases, we have non-infectious diseases, right? Mental health is a non-infectious disease. Like, you can't bite someone and then they get a mental illness. I'm going to name three non-communicable diseases, right? And I want you to rank them in order of which is the most common. All right, ready? I'm going to list them out. First, mental illness. Second, hypertension. Third, diabetes. Rank them. Which is number one, the most common, number two, the second most common, number three, the third most common. Sorry? Diabetes and hypertension.
Is it mental illness,
Okay.
diabetes, hypertension?
Yes. Diabetes, okay. Hypertension, mental health, okay. Anyone else? Yes. Okay. Hypertension. Okay, so I'll tell you something interesting. If you combine all the cases of hypertension and diabetes, they still wouldn't equal the cases of mental health, of mental illness. So mental illness is so number one that if you add number two and number three, they don't even add up to its number oneness. Let me put it in context. 1 out of every 4 persons will have a mental health disorder before they die. Okay, no. So that is your young people. So when I'm talking about before you die, it seems like a long ways away, right? Okay, let me bring it home. 1 out of 8 people has a mental health disorder.
Right now.
Right now.
Just counting.
Yes. Every time, like without fail, everyone just mentally starts doing. And okay, let me also tell you something. One of the things that we almost instinctively do when we hear this statistic is that we start counting to see if we can identify the person, right? The funny thing is, everything that you think in your head that becomes the basis of identifying the person is part of the problem we have with stigma. So if you think the person will probably be twitching in some way, stigma, it's not true. Most people with mental illnesses do not twitch. If you think they're going to bite you, if you think they're going to be laughing too much, if you think whatever it is that is the basis for your trying to identify the person comes from our myths and misunderstandings about mental health distress and why we stigmatize those conditions. Because chances are, it may very well be you. Gang.
Everyone is. They're reviewing the last 48 hours.
Exactly. Everybody's thinking, wait, when I said I didn't eat, is that a mental illness?
Okay, so let me ask one more general question, and then we would go to questions that are a bit more specific for this demographic.
Yeah.
The general question is just basically, you've worked in this space for some time, particularly in Kaduna. What are trends that you're seeing, whether good or bad? Like, what are the trends? And this goes, across the spectrum. So from things like depression, I was going to say mild, but nothing is mild. From things like depression, all the way to anxiety attacks, substance abuse. Like, what are the trends? Are they going down? Are they going up? What are we seeing in Kaduna in particular?
In Kaduna in particular, well, the truth is there's no trend that is trending down, health-wise, whether it's mental health, whether it's physical health. All our non-communicable diseases are trending upwards. And the demographic is also shifting downwards. So what that means is, in Kaduna, for example, we're seeing a lot more young people with hypertension, with diabetes, and of course, with mental health disorders, okay? That's across board. When it comes to mental illnesses, which is why I said it would probably be very difficult for you to pick out, the most common ones are mood disorders, anxiety, depression, and stress-related mental health challenges, okay? Less common are psychotic disorders, personality disorders. These are the ones that get a lot of media and press. And then one of the other very, very, very common mental health disorder that we don't often realize becomes a mental health disorder is substance use disorders, drug use, and drug dependence in particular.
Okay. Just a quick question. Does coffee dependence count?
Yes and no. So here's the thing. Does coffee dependence count? Yes and no. So here's the thing. For something to be, medically speaking, a disorder, it must lead to dysfunction. Are we together? If it doesn't lead to dysfunction, it is not a disorder. So, yes.
A very simple example of dysfunction.
Have you ever had alcohol? I thought you people said this is a safe space. Have you?
He may have.
Okay. Now, let's assume you have. Let's assume you go to your favorite drinking joint, have a drink. Do you go to work the next morning? Why did you say that as a matter of fact? You have to go to work, right? You do realize that there's people who were probably at that drinking joint with you that didn't make it to work the next day. And that's not the first time that they've skipped work because they were drinking. Or they get to work, they reek of alcohol, and they have a little thing of alcohol just so that they could function at work. So your drinking is not in any way stopping you from being a good worker, a good husband, a good whatever it is that you are. It has its place. Whereas for some other people, it has become, it's not fun. It is a necessary thing where their lives are so dysfunctional because of this. So with coffee and tea and cola and some of these things that are often mentioned, we are yet to find cases where people become dependent on it and they miss work because they were drinking coffee, or they sold their Tesla cars because they needed to buy coffee, or they were out in the middle of the bush doing some weird stuff to get money to buy coffee. So yes, people need coffee to function, but in the clinical sense of dependence, in fact, and I'm going to say this, and I'm not advocating anything, right? It actually is classed on, I don't know what that look is for.
I'm listening.
But coffee is one of those few substances that we have classed under something called helpful or beneficial use, except for people who have pre-existing conditions. Like for people who have anxiety disorders, coffee would make that worse and you cannot function. For people who have medical conditions that preclude it, if you take coffee and it kills you, you can see that that's not beneficial, right? But that falls under that category, okay?
All right, fantastic.
Someone had their hand up, I don't.
No, we can break and take questions. So,
That's when I'm getting to talk about addiction. Because some people say there are good addictions and bad addictions. Are we now categorize addiction as malfunction?
No, we're not doing that yet. Addiction is a medical condition. And perhaps when we get there, I don't know if we're there yet, I'll explain to you what that medical condition is. But addiction falls...
Go for it.
Okay, so addiction falls under the category of something we call substance use disorders. Okay? Substance use disorders do not develop overnight. That's the first. Most mental health conditions start and progress and get worse. So a person has to first start using substances. And when they're using the substance, initially, there's no problem. So they go have a drink with their friends, put it down, and go home. That's not a use disorder. That is just substance use. Now, they start to see some problems with their use, but nothing too serious. So for example, I use and I misbehave, and everyone complains about it. I use and I don't remember what happens. I use and I tell myself I don't want to do this anymore, but whenever I use, I do it. Now we're crossing into, there's a little bit of dysfunction, but we're nowhere close to addiction. Okay? So now we're talking about very low to moderate or mild substance use disorder. There's some problems with it, okay? But nothing too serious. Over time, two things happen. For some people who have, unfortunately, the genetic tendency to develop addiction, over time, and in a shorter time than normal, your brain becomes rewired. And that use helps that to happen. When the brain becomes rewired, and this person cannot, on their own, in any way, stop that use, there's a whole lot of other things that we have to see to call it addiction. The person is now addicted to that substance. Now, this is very vague sounding, right? So let me bring it to something else that we all know very well. How many people here have diabetes in your family? Raise your hand. There's someone raise it clearly now so I will see. This is not a matter of, God forbid, you have diabetes in your family. Okay, keep your hands up. Now, how many of you have diabetes presently? Look around. No one, right? No one, right? Now, but you do realize that those of you with your hands up, if you don't keep tabs on how you consume sugar, you will eventually become diabetic, right? Now, how many of you have ever taken sugar and thought to yourself, oh, more, that was way too much sugar? How many of you are diabetic? Exactly. Similarly, I'm sure Pablo has had some days where, oh, more, that was way too much alcohol. But that doesn't make him an addict. All right? But the thing is, once you become diabetic, there's no going back. And once you're diabetic, there's no such thing as, let me take it small, and manage it. Your body can no longer handle sugar the way a quote-unquote normal person can. And that's the same way addiction works. Once the brain changes and the person becomes addicted, there's no going back. It's a chronic it's a thing that you have to live with for the rest of your life. So there's no such thing as, okay, I will now be drinking small. I will now be drinking small and manage it. Now, let me tell you why that's important. A lot of people would say, I know somebody that was an addict and then he stopped. Then he wasn't an addict. He probably had a use disorder. It was causing a lot of problems and then he stopped. But he wasn't an addict. A lot of parents would say to their kids, you and this boy were drinking the whole time. He has stopped. You see how his life is good. Why can't you stop? Because he's an addict. He is not. Once the brain changes, and here's why that's important. Some of the fundamental places in the brain that change are the parts of the brain that handle something that we all know as willpower. The part of the brain that processes willpower for you. So when you say, I'm going to do that and you do it, or I'm not going to do that and you don't do that, is the part of the brain that is rewired by addiction. So when you tell a person who has developed addiction to use their willpower, it's like telling someone who has lost their legs to get up and run. So the best case scenario is to intervene before the brain becomes rewired and the person becomes an addict, right? That's the best case scenario, right? Right? Right. Unfortunately, where do you take a person who they only misbehave once in a while? Where do you take them to? Psychiatric? The problem is psychiatric only has a rehab, and rehab is for people who have developed addiction. So if you take the person to psychiatric and they screen the person, yes, they may have some issues, but this is not serious enough yet for rehab. So you have to go back and do more work. This is the problem with our current mental health system. There are no services for these illnesses when they first develop before they become severe. You have to be mad enough to be locked up in the psychiatric to get treatment. Otherwise, you stay on the street and keep at it till you get madder, yes. So that's actually part of the problem and what we see. So there's a lot of confusing messages. Am I an addict? Am I not an addict? Is this person an addict? Is this person not an addict? And remember that people do a lot of terrible things under the influence of drugs. So, there was something else I needed to mention. I told you that one of the ways that people become addicted is because they had the genetic tendency towards it, right? Right? Are you also aware that your genetics is not only passed down, but that your environment also does some rewiring of your genetics, right? So there's something called epigenetics, where your interaction with your environment also helps to rewire your genetics. So now here's something really great, okay? Some drugs will induce addiction faster than other drugs, and once it is induced, it writes it in your genetic code so you could pass it on to your kids. So, your family, there was no addiction. They now born you. You now start taking some drugs because you didn't have it in your family. There are some substances that would rewire the brain into addiction. And once that happens, you will pass those genes down to your kids. I mean, it's a gift that keeps on giving. Now some of you are wondering, what are some of those drugs, Abby? So we know how to avoid. See, I didn't come with good news, right? Okay.
Go on.
I'm allowed to be honest. See, I'm not the one who did these things, okay? It's not my, because I feel like a lot of you will, I feel like a lot of you will hold it against me, right? But it's not me that did this. Opioids. So a lot of the pharmaceutical drugs that people abuse induce addiction way quicker than their street counterparts. Let me not use big words. Cough syrup, pentazocine, tramadol, a lot of the synthetic drugs like crystal methamphetamine, these are drugs that the time it takes for a person who may not even have the genetic loading to go from drug use to disorder to addiction is very, very short. Now, here's something else. Again, it is not my fault. This is how I met it. In northwestern Nigeria, the preferred drugs of use are these class of drugs.
So in essence, more drug addicts are being born every day. By no fault of theirs.
And no fault of mine, because there's the look I'm getting. I'm just telling you what you people are doing. And don't look at me like, don't say we, you know. Now, here's the thing I love about addiction, and I love about talking about addiction. Whenever I'm talking in a group about addiction, initially, most people don't know what I'm talking about. Most people don't take drugs, you don't drink, you don't smoke weed, you don't know what I'm talking about. I mean, these are things you see on TV.
Go on.
It's a fucking lie. It's a lie. This is the demographic of drug use. Every single one of you, I won't cast anyone, but I'll say it this way. Every single one of you knows someone that is very close to you that has not just a small drug use disorder, but a serious drug use disorder. No, there's no need to raise your hand. It's everyone. So it's whoever has their hand down that is lying. Everyone. Everyone. Everyone.
So, I mean, just to cap up the bad news, there was this stat you mentioned the other day about predisposition to future drug abuse.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I was talking about there are certain things that happen in our lives that could predispose us. Predispose is a big word. It just means it makes it more likely that it will happen to you. One of them is bonding between a mother, not parents, mother and child in the first 2 years of that child's life is a factor that will actually, in a lot of cases, serve as a predictive factor that this person will become an addict much later in life. I'll tell you another. I thought you said I should cap the bad news because that.
Go on.
Okay, now here's another one, and this applies a lot more to this demographic. Particularly with boys, I'll get to girls in a minute. Boys who have an anxiety disorder and consume alcohol or opioid drugs before the age of 16 are more likely to become dependent on it, addicted to it. Now, you're probably asking, why would boys have an anxiety disorder that early in life? Do you know what one of the most common predisposing factors for an anxiety disorder in a child is? Raised voice quarreling in the house that they grow up in before the age of 5. Let me put it in context. If you grow up in a house where the adults in that house, most times your parents, yell, they shout at each other when they are quarreling. Not, of course, the ones where they actually now beat each other, it's much worse, right? Before the age of 5. Now, keep in mind that the child does not understand what exactly is going on. It triggers an anxiety disorder in that child. And for boys who have that anxiety disorder, and a friend goes, here, try this, before the age of 16, you're probably going to end up seeing someone like me much later in life. Now, I'll tell you why I said we should leave girls out and come back to boys for a minute. You're wondering, but do children actually have anxiety disorders? I said this at the last talk. Most mental health disorders begin in childhood before the age of 15. In Nigeria, almost 100% of them are diagnosed in adulthood. So you probably may not have known that you had an anxiety disorder. You just realized that when you drank that drink or when you tried that codeine, you felt complete for the first time in your life. For girls, it is not an anxiety disorder. It is a mood disorder tending more towards depression. And consuming the same types of drugs lead to dependence. So a good example is when you take codeine because the relationship you found yourself in just doesn't make any sense and you just need time to pass. You're probably going to be stuck in that time passing for a very long time. So yes, mental health conditions predispose and make addiction more of a reality. And for people with schizophrenia, for people, it's across board, okay? Now, why should this really not be shocking to any of you? It is the exact same thing if we were talking about physical health. If you grew up in a house where they are always fighting, chances are you got injured a lot more often, Abby? So if I said that, you would not be surprised. Why are you now surprised when I say if you grow up in a house where they are always fighting? It affects your brain. I know, but ask yourself, so why is it really surprising? It's normal when your father stoned your mother with slippers. Sometimes he will hit you, and injure you, and you can't tell anybody how it happened. So why do you think it would not affect your brain?
Okay, let's move the gears a little and talk about stress, right? Yeah. I mean, stress is sort of positioned, particularly in this type of spaces, as a badge of honor, right? There's the idea that you need to hustle. And hustling in this type of spaces for many people means sometimes working multiple jobs in different time zones. And then, let me just mix it up. There's economic pressure as well, right? And then in a place like Nigeria, in a place like Kaduna, there are also stressors that are just built into the environment, right? There's, the uncertainty. In a place like Kaduna, there's probably, for people that have lived here long enough, crisis fatigue, all of that. So when you put all of that together, like how does that start to affect, first of all, just even, start from the beginning, cognitive function, how does that affect things like focusing, things like thinking logically, how does that affect it, and what are sort of like the ways or habits that people can start to build to guard against things like that?
Okay, so from here on out, I'll also start to chip in some of the good news, okay? It seems like it's been too dreary. But one question, at what age do you think that the brain stops, reaches maturity? At what age would you say that the brain has reached its... No, say it with confidence. Don't worry, you are just as wrong as everyone else. 20 what? 24? Okay, good guess. Anyone else? 25, good guess. Okay, so on average, and I'm also going to explain why I'm being a bit cautious with this, the brain reaches maturity at 26. Now, on average, this is given good nutrition, good medical condition, you grow up, you're eating your vegetables, you're doing all of that, your brain should reach around that 26. I'm not sure what everyone's this thing is, but some 27, 28, but that 26, it's wrapping up its development. Now, in a space like this, it means that a lot of the people here, your brain is still developing. The second thing is the brain develops in stages for obvious reasons. The first job of the brain is to keep you alive. So it will develop all those parts of it that help to keep you alive. The parts of the brain that are not directly related to keeping you alive, but that have to do with improving the quality of your life, are the parts of the brain that develop last. And unfortunately, the part that develops latest is the part that we use to do something we call executive function. Executive function is decision making, good decision making, okay? Planning, long-term planning, strategic type thinking, managing multiple variables, projecting into the future. So again, please don't give me that look. I am not the one who designed this. It's the same way I met it. That's why the younger you are, the less sense you have. Again, I'm not the one. I'm not the one. See, and the truth is, because it's your brain, it feels like you've really got this, right? But to be honest, you really don't. Okay? And that doesn't mean that some of the older people here truly have it as well, right? But biologically speaking, the younger you are, the less adept you are at things like executive function requiring. I'm going somewhere with this, so please stay with me for a second. Managing stress and the more effective management of stress requires executive function. And that's the last part to fully develop. Now, for those of us that are older, if you think back to when you were in your early 20s, you had a lot more crises back to back to back because everything seemed to be a crisis, right? And then you got older and you would meet similar type of those crises and you'd be like, Now, for those that are younger, don't feel left out. You are having those crises now. And it's fine to have those crises now, right? Because that's exactly how the brain develops. You see, the trick about all of this is you need those crises to help the development of those executive functions. So the experience you build as you go through the crisis help you to develop that part of the brain effectively. The drawback is it doesn't feel good while it is happening. Now, why is this important? In the tech space where you are, and one of the things I'm always happy to admit is that when it comes to anything tech, I am completely daft, and I am at peace with that. I can use Chrome, I can use WhatsApp, I can use Facebook very well. I'm learning Instagram right now, and that's about as far as it goes. But meet me anywhere I can, yes, I know those ones, but you see all this thing you people do here on your own. But this is a space where you learn a programming language today. By next week, Tuesday, it's out of date, you have to learn a new one. And you can't be like Joe and say, I'm not interested, because if you don't learn it, you don't get work. And if you don't get work, you are in the back of the line. So you are constantly in need of a very heavy, intensive dose of cognitive development, just to stay normal. What that means is you're constantly using some of the most stressful parts of your brain just to keep up. as we're talking now, some people are probably even in some class learning something and trying to stay, normal and all of that. It's a very, very demanding field. And like he said, then the concept of time zones now doesn't matter. If, for me, I know by 5 I've closed from work. For you, by 5, your customer is opening in work and then you're greeting people good morning. So it's round the clock. These things are very tasking on the brain that is still developing. And so the feeling impact of it is a lot more intense. Oh, one more thing. You also generally work in isolation.
I have a question on
Yeah.
that, so maybe just look at
You also generally work in isolation. Now, I mentioned this at the last talk. We think socializing is, it's an add-on. Unfortunately, our biology is designed around social interactions. The less of them we have, the less functional we are, even without realizing it. And social interactions doesn't mean they're always all pleasant, are part of how the brain balances and develops. You're going through all of this stress primarily in isolation, where social interactions often help to diffuse, normalize, and manage some of those stress. You are managing them in an isolated space. The result is this group of people, young people in tech spaces, have a lot of, note the word I'm going to use now, mental health distress. Not necessarily mental illnesses, but mental health distress. Distress means that there's something that is disturbing to the individual in that particular space, but not necessarily an illness yet. However, if it is not properly managed, it could lead to an illness. I said there was good news, right? That was the good news, that it is distress, not illness. So if it's managed properly, it will go away. You don't seem happy about that. It's just distress, it can go. I'm not saying it's mental illness. Okay, it's mental illness. Does that make you happier? No, it's very, mental health distress is very common among this group. And if it is not well managed, it could lead to mental illnesses, especially when there's a genetic predisposition. Yes. One of the first ways to manage mental health distress, someone whispered it on the side, is increasing social interactions. There are other, for groups like yours, there are more specific things that you need to do and that your bosses need to also do. One of them is because you constantly have to learn, to stay good at your job, then learning time must be included in your work time. Meaning, for example, for me, if I wanted to go to school, I'd have to take a break from work and go to school. If I wanted to do an online course, I would have to do it while I'm in the office, right? But for you guys, it would be ideal if on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. is learning time. So if you're taking a course, whatever it is, that is by force. You take 2 to 5 p.m. to learn something, or you don't have to do it as a group, but that's your time to do your learning program. And the reason is, one of the things that inhibits or makes it difficult for you to have functional social interactions is that there's no demarcation between your work time and your personal time. All has flown into one. If learning time, because it is a requirement for work, is fit into work time, then when you leave work, you are in personal time. Of course, these things are ideal. I don't work in this space, so I don't know how you could put them into practice. But that's one way that it would reduce the stress that is present in the system, okay? I mentioned social interactions, and I must be clear that I mean with real humans, not with ChatGPT. That's one. And the real humans that you're having these social interactions with need to be physically present. So not your online friends in Canada. That doesn't work. I thought someone would ask me, what's the problem with ChatGPT? It gives me really good advice. Ask me now, let me answer you.
What's the problem with ChatGPT?
No, I want one of them to ask. Okay. Because it actually perpetuates your ignorance. So it's weird. 1 plus 1 is 2, right? 2 plus 2 is 4. 6 plus 7 is 18. Why did Bola snub me this morning? Is a completely different type of question that you cannot program into ChatGPT to answer. For ChatGPT to give you an answer, you're going to give it certain fundamental assumptions. Those assumptions are your biases. The answer it will give you is an answer that is based on your biases, not based on the reality of why did Bola snub me this morning. So it would say, Bola snubbed you possibly because she's a witch. She never really liked you. She's on the side, calling your boyfriend. And you say, yes, I saw her with my boyfriend yesterday. I knew it was this. And ChatGPT, then you send her a message. You think I don't know what you did yesterday. And then it goes off. And then you think, I had a good conversation with someone. It doesn't work. Do you know how to know why Bola snubbed you yesterday? Someone ask me now. I'm the specialist here. Ask me, there's a technical process to this. No, not why. Ask me, how do you find out? No, you have to make it sound technical. So say, what's the technical way of finding out? Yes, ask me. Why Bola snubbed you yesterday? You have to ask Bola. You see how weird that seems, that you would have to ask Bola. Yesterday I was greeting you, you didn't answer me. It seems so weird, right? Having weird conversations is part of how you develop as an individual. At some point, you're going to explain to your child sex. You found out, and you remember how that went. So that's actually an essential skill, having weird conversations to arrive at a resolution. Because until you have that conversation with Bola, the stress from there will not go away. So having social interactions with real humans in physical form, scheduling work and non-work times. Those are two of the things that are very, very essential to start to manage it. These kinds of interactions actually would help other people pick up when you're not really okay and be able to help with that.
So I'll just ask a quick question that leans into everything you're saying, and it's about remote work, which is also very prevalent. I feel like you've answered some of the questions, but I'll still ask you anyway. And if you have any extra thoughts, you can add. Obviously, remote work is very isolating, and can lead to a lot of loneliness, which in itself is an issue. But also leads to many situations where people are not able to build the support structure that they need for life, right? So, besides the two strategies you just mentioned, are there any other ones that you have specifically for combating loneliness when you're in that type of situation, and also for building that support system?
So, unfortunately, there's no simple answer to this. I wish there was. What remote work offers is a lot more money, right? And access to money and flexibility and all of those things. And remember, all of us are facing economic challenges, economic pressures in one way or the other. A lot of you came into the tech space because of all the promise of non-stop cash flow, right? But then, just like in every other space, you're going to have to make a decision on where the line is and what actually matters more to you. With remote work, there's isolation. You're going to have to understand that the consequence of persistent isolation is poor social relationships, which you need to be healthy mentally. A lot of quote-unquote life outside will pass you by, right? I mean, you're doing very well at work, you have the money, but you come outside and what you wanted to use the money for is no longer there. The friends that you wanted to have this experience with, they've also moved on. The things that, so you've heard this said so many times, there's a need for balance. What no one really tells you is that you're the one who determines what balance looks like. And the way to make that determination is, what exactly do you want? And with everything, you can't have everything all at one time without serious consequences. If you're going to have everything, you're going to have to pace them and take them one at a time. So, for example, you could decide, my 20s is where I'm going to make all the money I'm going to make. And then when I'm in my 30s and 40s, I'll focus on building social relationships. Interesting idea, but note, you're going to be isolated in your 20s when you need those relationships to develop your mind. If you switch it and say, okay, in my 20s, I'll focus a lot more on this, then you're going to have to be okay with being the broke one in the group. But you can't be everything at once. My suggestion really is, you know what exactly distresses you the most. Deal with that one. Not the one that the media, your family, everyone else is saying you should be worried about. Worry about the one that is doing you presently. So if you're really concerned about being isolated, being lonely, not having good relationships and all of that, then deal with that now. Deal with that now. If you are concerned about everything, so it's not just one thing that you're concerned about everything with a matter of intensity, then come see me. That's okay too. The come seeing me is not a terrible thing. At least now with the Kaduna State Mental Health Bill, it's not a bad thing. All right? I will also tell you, I mentioned mental health distress. Most mental health distresses can be resolved with a few sessions of conversation with the right people. Sounds strange, right? How many of you have ever felt ill? You didn't know what was wrong. You just felt like you were not okay, you were not well. And then you met, for a lot of us, it's our mothers, right? For those of us our moms are not witches, right? You went to your mom and you said, this is how it's doing me or him. This is how it's doing me. And she said, come, sit here, put your head here. And then she rubbed your back. Then you fell asleep. The next morning, you were perfectly fine. Or something like that. Maybe gave you something to eat, made a tea for you, did something. And then the next day, you were fine. It wasn't that you weren't ill. You actually were in a state of distress. And the distress resolved when you had, ready for it, and this is a technical word, loving, supportive care. fathers could do this as well. I'm not ruling you people out from providing loving, because sometimes, even if it's not your child, if your girlfriend, your whoever it is comes to you, you could tell them, put your head on my shoulder, rub their back. Even for your guy friends. Now I'm saying this and guys are like, I'll put my, calm down, calm all the way down, calm down. Wait now, he's not just going to walk in and then put his leg on your lap. Now there's stages to this. You will talk first now, like, what is the problem, right? But here, let me tell you something, right? There's something I think that we don't do enough of as men, right? And we need to stop that nonsense. I didn't think of it on time. If not, I would have included it in the bill specifically for men. You should hug your male friends. I'm telling you, and when I put it as an amendment to the bill, if you have a guy friend that you don't hug at least 3 times in a week, you should be locked up in jail. Why? No, I'm serious. No, I'm serious. Why is it, no, wait now, no, hold on. Especially you over there. Why is it easier, why is it easier for me to offer my male friend a joint, a shot, to carry him to a shower house and pay, than now than to just give him a hug and say these 3 words: everything will be okay. Forward. Okay. No kissing, just hug. That's it. Is it really? No. Now wow. Okay, I'm definitely adding this to the bill.
All right. So, I mean, one of the things that you said, around balance, made me remember a video, and you may or may not have seen it, but it's basically a video of Jeff Bezos, who I'm sure everyone here knows, talking about how he hates the idea of work-life balance. And in his words, because balance denotes that there is a trade-off. And he prefers the term work-life harmony because he thinks that if you function really well at work, it affects how well you function out of work. And if you function, like if you don't have issues, you have a loving family, you're paid well, all those things outside of work are working well, it also just improves, your output at work and, how you see work. What are your just general thoughts, on that?
I think it's a question of semantics, really. Trade-off implies you give something at the expense of something. That's exactly what happens when there's imbalance. With imbalance, there is a trade-off. You're losing something to gain something. Harmony implies that things are working together to a particular end. And that's essentially what balance conveys, where you decide, okay, this is what I would like at this stage of my life, and you organize your life in such a way that each component is balanced with the other to give the harmony towards your set goal. So I think it's a question of semantics, but the point still remains the same thing. There is a trade-off when things are imbalanced, when there is too much focus on one aspect of our lives. Even this conversation is the product of a 60-something-year-old trade-off where we have focused on physical health at the expense of this. Similarly, if we only focus on mental health, that's all we ever worry about, malaria will kill you. So I think what he's saying is essentially what we're talking about at the end of the day, is that you're a whole person from head all the way down, and you don't exist in isolation. Your work life matters, your home life matters. For those of you who have a spiritual life, that matters. Your social life matters. And all of these are not separate entities that belong to a person. They're all a part of that same person that is you. And they all have to be managed harmoniously.
Awesome. So I mean, just moving on. In Nigeria, mental health or the idea of mental health or mental unwellness comes with a lot of stigma,
Yeah.
right? A lot of things are either, spiritual issues or what they call this one now. There's a particular name I'm looking for where your family, your ancestors, or and some of these things are just not basic, but mental health issues, right? So and this question is for everyone's benefit, but also for my personal benefit. How do we help more young people talk about their struggles in a way that's respectful, obviously, because you're not trying to disrupt the system, but also just lays the ground for more advocacy for professional help versus spiritual or cultural?
Yeah. It's a multi-layered question, so I'll try and answer the very different layers. So one thing that is common to young people, and I don't know, I was young at some point, I'm not so much now. It's something I did a lot of, and that was to find shortcuts to everything. If there was a shortcut, I'll take it. If there's a shortcut for work, I'll take it. If there's any shortcut at all, I'll find it. Pleading mental health disorder or distress to use as a shortcut, either to get out of a responsibility, to get out of work, to advance some sort of cause, is unacceptable. And we all know when we do that, right? Because now mental health is trending. So there's this tendency to now say, I can't watch Plato, it affects my mental health. To be honest, I was actually in a meeting with a lot of old people. Is this being recorded?
Yes.
Okay, so we all do it. I was going to give you details of the meeting, but since we're being recorded, the person does not see me. But I use mental health as excuse to leave the meeting, right? So we all do it, right? But the point is, the brain, like every other part of our body, has a lot of capacity for something called resilience. A lot of the negatives that we go through in the course of life does not actually destroy us. We bounce back, and it makes us that much better. The idea of mental health as somehow reducing our resilience as individuals is a false idea. You're all resilient. So while you may have distress, and by distress I mean it's uncomfortable, it doesn't in any way mean that you can't recover and be better from that. Every single one of you has that within you. But like everyone who's going through distress, whether it is my leg that is twisted or I have a heart problem, you need support. If we look at it from that point of view, I am distressed, I need support. With that support, I can be better than I was before. Then reaching out to say, I need help, I need support, when you genuinely need it, is common sense. It's not a sign of weakness, it's actually a sign of smartness. And so that's the first thing that I always like people to keep in mind. I will be first to say, for the last few days, I just haven't been able to think straight. And I have friends, I have people on my phone that I would send a message like, I need to speak to you. We need to just go hang out, or we need to sit down and say or do nothing. That's on the one hand. When you have a mental illness, there is no amount of vibes and energy and hiding and all of those things that cure it. For every illness, whether mental or physical, without treatment, it will get worse. The worse it becomes, the harder it is to treat, and the harder it is to recover. So it is safe when you suspect you have an illness, especially if the symptoms persist after 3 days, do what?
Consult your doctor.
You already know this one now. So it is the lack of consultation. Now you're probably wondering where. Now there's CATSAMSA, right? That's my agency. We have our numbers. I think they have the number.
Good share.
So you could call the numbers actually on, and based on where you are, you can be referred to somewhere close to you where you can get services. The other thing is, a lot of people may be interested in how can I help? Please and please call the number and say, I want to help out. We will provide training because, as you can imagine, not everything requires specialist psychiatric care. Some of it just requires being trained in how to talk to someone and talk them through the challenges that they're having. We will provide the training for you in exchange for your free work. Then you manage that in your work-life balance and all of that and all that. But please come and do free work for us, okay? That's not that bad. Now let's talk about spirits and juju and madness and all of that. I'll tell you about 3 incidents that I have witnessed, right? There's a lady in the psychiatric hospital when I used to work there that was about 6, by her calculations, about 6 or 7 months pregnant. She came to the psychiatric hospital because she was referred by her OBGYN to come to the psychiatric hospital for review. She came with her scans and everything. There was no baby. There was no baby. So she was obviously admitted. She wasn't given medication. She had to undergo some intense therapy. And over about a 6-week period, the pregnancy resolved. As in, it went away. Her tummy went back down. It's not physical that me and you are here. Now, we call those somatizing reactions. You people have no idea just how powerful your brain is. Almost every chemical reaction, all the hormonal reactions that happen in your body, some people call the brain the master hormone producer. If you can get, the truth is, this is not X-Men thing. Yeah, there's no way you can sit in your room and practice and do it on your own, right? But she was able to trigger all the physical symptoms of pregnancy because of how badly she wanted to be pregnant. I'll tell you another case more recently. You know, Kaduna State has a shelter for women and girls. I was talking with the person who runs the shelter and suggested that we go in and review all the women in there, because chances are if you need to run away from home, you're probably under some serious mental health distress. So let's review them and provide care for them. As you can imagine, 100% of them required mental health services. Some of them actually even required medication. So we now made it a common thing where we would go there every Thursday. One of the Thursdays when we went there was a lady whose husband and her family stay in Giwa local government. Do we know where Giwa local government is?
Somewhere far.
Yes, somewhere far, because I don't know where it is, but I know it's very far. It's there, right? They stay in Giwa, and she had run away from her house because she had issues with her husband. Now, the family were coming with the man, and they were going to have this talk to resolve the issues so that he can take her back home. That was the plan. We got there on a Thursday. She had a baby on her back. And we were in the clinic section, and she fell on the floor and started having a very bad seizure. You know what seizures are? The jerking reaction. But not just the seizure, she was talking in a completely different language. I had the video before. I can't show you, obviously, because it's a patient. She was talking in... So, now, 2 things happened that were very funny. First, all the nurses and the staff ran away because apparently there's something called ajanu, and that's how it manifests. So, and the ajanu can catch you. mental health illnesses are not communicable. It will not catch you or anything. So this is what we do, we thought it was a seizure until she started and doing the jerking. So, immediately said, get me the 2 tablets, quickly, get the tablet, quickly. And brought vitamin B and sat her up as she was jerking, put the vitamin B in her mouth, gave her water, and it stopped. There's no relationship between vitamin B and seizures. We call that a placebo treatment. We said it loud enough for her to hear. She was not conscious of what she was doing. She wasn't doing it intentionally. This is also a somatizing reaction. Now, it turns out that her husband is a terrible person. When we found out the details of it, she ended up having to stay with a family member here in Kaduna. The thought of having to go back to that man triggered such an intense stress-induced reaction that she started doing that. The purpose of that was to not leave the facility. Now, I say this because that guy over there that asked physically, if you had met that woman who was physically pregnant and they did the scan and showed you there's no baby inside, not be spirit with that. If you had met this lady while she was speaking in another language doing this, is that not spiritual? And so how come it went away with medical intervention? I be spirit, they fear medicine. So a lot of our ideas about what is spiritual, what is not spiritual, also comes from a place of ignorance. And there's a lot that we don't know about mental illness. This is not unusual. There's also a lot that you don't know about kidney illness, Abi. There's a lot that you don't know about any illness in general because you're not a medical person. So why not try and check if there is a physical explanation with someone who that is their job, and if it is not, then you head to the spiritual side. That's the second thing about spiritual. Now, the third is an issue of stigma. How many of us agree that mental health and mental illness is heavily stigmatized? Raise your hand. Raise it clearly if you agree that it is heavily stigmatized. Mental health and mental illness is heavily stigmatized. Raise your hand. Now, I want you guys, all of you, look around. These are, everyone with their hands up, are the agents of stigma. If we want stigma to change, you don't have to ask, what can Katsamsa do? What can the government do? Of course, that's what I'm saying. Let's raise awareness. Let's do all these foolish things we do that doesn't change anything. Would you marry a woman who has a history of mental illness, sir? I was asking the person next to you, but since you put yourself in, your child comes up and introduces someone they want to marry, and turns out that they have a history of mental illness, your answer would be? Someone, no, I even heard it. Did you hear what she said? As in a former madman. I love it. Yes. No, not a current madman. He has retired from the madness. Not a madman in active service. No, he has retired. And so who would the person now marry? A fellow madman, ba? Now here's the beauty of it. Remember I said 1 out of 8 people have a mental illness. That's why you are married to someone with a mental illness without knowing. Because they know that if they told you, you would never have agreed to marry them. When it now shows up, they have to tell you it is spiritual because they can't tell you that they were treated for it beforehand. And you, that is pretending to be shocked, are also hiding to treat your own mental illness. That's why when I finish giving talks like this and I leave, my phone doesn't stop ringing because everybody that has a mental illness have been pretending like, what is all this mental stuff they're talking about? Now, I heard you, and to be honest, I don't dey crazy. And I just need help. but don't let anybody know. And then when you finish, the next person sits there next to you, say, bros, I don't do the crazy. Like, you see yourself. We are our own problem when it comes to stigma. And that's why when someone opens up and says, I've been struggling with a mental illness, all of a sudden there's this chain reaction of, me too, me too, me too, me too. All of us are mad, yay! So stigma, it's up. I don't know what we'll do about stigma. It's up to you guys.
Sorry, can you help us put more light on at what point does it become a mental health to...
So let me just ask this question, right? At what point should you try to resolve things yourself, and at what point should you call a professional?
I'll keep it very simple. If symptoms persist after 3 days, go and see a professional.
Okay. So, I mean, next question, sort of related to this. There's this idea that therapy is for rich people. It's a rich people, it's a rich people treatment or a rich people thing. But as a young person in Kaduna with a limited budget, like what are the places they should be going to? Where are the places they should, that are affordable and they'll get good care?
So, the most affordable for now, if you have a drug use disorder that requires rehab, can anyone guess where the most affordable rehab is?
Barnard Psychiatric.
Barnard Psychiatric, very good guess. Can anyone guess how much Barnard Psychiatric charges a month? It's the cheapest, so. 80-something thousand, very good guess. Yes. Huh? 3,000. Now, okay, so Barnard Psychiatric charges 350,000 a month. Calm down now. I think Naomi's trying to get your attention. 350,000 a month. You have to be there for a minimum of 4 months, and you probably have to make a deposit of 3 months upfront.
Send it to me. Okay.
Do you, someone said madness doesn't pay, and I'll tell you why. Okay, so you were wrong. Barnard Psychiatric is not the cheapest rehab in Kaduna. Kadsemsa, the agency, we have a rehab in television, and we charge 250,000 a month. It's not that much cheaper, but at least it's something. And I'll tell you why therapy, rehab, has to be expensive. It is because, how many of you have seen cheap cancer treatment? The truth is, specialist care must be expensive. But remember, here's the hack. It doesn't become addiction overnight. Before it gets to that point, the services that you require, if they are available, are cheaper. So, for example, the reason why one of our projects right now is making sure that at least in every local government, we have something called a drop-in center where you can meet with a trained counselor, not the person that will give you advice and show you how to pray, a trained counselor, and talk through things, is because those services will be free. The challenge we have now is a manpower challenge. So the more people we have to train to provide those services, the more those services become available. But at that stage, the intensity requires is not something that you have to pay hundreds of thousands of naira for. We have just completed the training of 100 staff at general hospitals, 10 general hospitals. The ones in Kaduna now, please take note, because now you can go there and get services for mental health. General Hospital Regasa, General Hospital Sabo, the one in Tudunwada, I don't remember and then General Hospital Kawo, Tudunwada, Sabo, and Regasa. These 4 general hospitals, you have doctors and nurses who are trained to provide mental health services, okay? If you go there, you're not going to pay 350,000 naira. But your madness needs to be at that level. But if you sit at home and nurse your madness past the primary and secondary level where we can provide affordable care, once it requires specialist care, it cannot be cheap. So my advice is, if you don't have big money to spend for specialist care, when you feel there's a problem, reach out for help.
I mean, I'll just take a quick online question. A will-be volunteer online is asking whether the training that you talked about earlier, where they could train and become sort of like staff, whether it's online or physical.
Physical.
Okay. So, I mean,
Because unfortunately, we are a Kaduna State government agency. I say unfortunately because I know that the needs extend beyond Kaduna, but our focus is the residents of Kaduna State. So we can't use Kaduna people's tax money to provide services for Lagos State. We love them. I have family everywhere, but our work focuses on Kaduna State.
okay. Yeah.
I don't think addiction is necessarily a bad thing. I think that addictions and habits work on the same pattern. That is tax and reward. When you do something, you get a reward. So you get addicted because most of the time the reward comes quicker. So for like our habits, like for example, if I want to be doing press-ups every morning, there's a reward in my brain from the accomplishment. So if I don't get like to make that into a habit, which works in the same functionality as addiction, is that not a bad thing? I think it's not addiction that is bad, it's what you're addicted to.
Yeah.
That is bad.
That's a fair assumption. It tells me two things. One, it means you came late, because I addressed this earlier. The second thing is it gives me the opportunity to address a common misconception. Habits are habits that are formed over time and become easily repetitive. People form habits based, like you said, on the rewards, on the outcomes, on what it helps them do. Addiction is a completely different thing. Addiction is an illness of the brain. And what that does is it rewires the brain such that that thing that has rewired the brain is no longer the function. The brain loses functionality in a number of ways. One, if you become addicted to alcohol, for example, the amount of alcohol you need to drink to feel normal will constantly increase to the point where you will get physical damage from the quantity of alcohol that you are consuming. Yet, the brain will not be satisfied. So when you started drinking, you drink 1 or 2 bottles of Star. When you are an alcoholic, you will drink 1 bottle of vodka, and your kidneys, your livers, all of those are shutting down, but your brain is still looking for alcohol. So it is not, I think this misconception comes from a place where we think of addiction as the person still being in control. The fundamental definition of addiction is a loss of control. When you go to the gym to do push-ups, you decided, I'm going to the gym to do push-ups. And it started raining, they told you the gym is on fire, and you turned back and went home. That's not how addiction functions. You head out to the gym, they tell you the gym is on fire, they're shooting people there, and you head to the gym, because if you don't do that push-up, you cannot function. So no, addiction is not just about having a bad habit. It goes way beyond that. And that's why most addicts, obviously, feel very, 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 very isolated, because people feel like this thing is obviously harming you, so stop. They can't stop. And that's the thing with the push-ups. When you want to stop, you stop. I'll tell you something interesting. An alcoholic who is taken off of alcohol without proper medical support, it can kill him. The reaction that would come from that can actually kill the person. I have never met a person who didn't do push-up and died as a result. So no, addiction is a very serious medical condition, very, very serious medical condition. Of course, we've learned to think of it as a bad habit because it probably developed from a bad habit, but then it crossed the line into something else, something complete. Just like diabetes is a very serious medical condition that probably developed from a bad habit. You know, I'll tell you something that happened to me. I have an uncle, a granduncle who died of diabetes, so it's very, very present in the family. About 3 or 4 years ago, I was laying down and I started feeling tingling in my feet. And anyone who knows me knows how my feelings towards sweet things and cakes and cheesecake, and I think even when that was happening, I was eating a cheesecake. I was laying in bed eating a cheese, and I felt the tingling, and I was like, oh my God, it's diabetic neuropathy. Where, oh God, it has finally happened. It has happened. So I put the cheesecake down. I sat up. I was thinking, so if I'm diabetic now, it means no more cake. I'm done for. So I sent a message to Bill. I was like, how does it, I have a friend who is a very close friend who's a doctor. How does it feel when the tingling thing starts with diabetes? He's like, who has diabetes? Just answer me. Who has diabetes? Just answer me. He was like, usually on the outer. I was like, oh, fuck. It's exactly where I'm feeling it. He was like, who has diabetes? He was like, I said, I think I have diabetes. He hung up. I didn't have diabetes, Sha, but I felt bad that, so you can't take me, that's how I would have died and you not take me seriously. But I didn't finish that cheesecake. I say this because we all have in our minds how we think these things play out, all right? But these are real medical conditions, and I think it's best to allow those people who've been trained in diagnosing and managing these things make the call. Don't worry if you can't tell if your brother is an addict or just misbehaving, right? Bring him, let me help you tell.
All right. So I mean, let's talk about the role technology and more specifically, technology broadly, but more specifically social media generally plays in terms, the role it plays with regards to mental health. And, just to add some context, right now, today, everyone has a mental health issue, at least on Twitter. Everyone has PTSD. PTSD is like party pack. People are skipping work because, they have mental health issues. What is social media doing? So that's one bucket of questions in terms of like how it's forming habits and changing, both good and bad, because now more people are aware, but also, people are abusing it. So that's one part of, the question. The second part is increasingly, because like social media companies in particular, but internet companies generally, thrive on how much attention you pay to them. Increasingly, they're being engineered to feed your dopamine, there are many studies about this. There's actually a book which you guys can check out. It's called The Anxious Generation. Jonathan Haidt, one of my favorite authors, just generally, that talks about like just looking at the data of what has happened or what is happening to the human brain post smartphone introduction. So just generally, like what are things you're seeing generally? What are your thoughts? And then what are things people should be looking out for? Because sometimes these things are insidious, right? Like it's not with stuff like dopamine addiction, if it's a thing, it's not a friend handing you a joint anymore. The rails that would exist, between somebody injecting your vein and you just looking at your screen and getting hooked, are just not there. So what are things you're seeing? What are your thoughts? And if it's a thing, what sort of advice do you have, for people?
Okay, so social media has brought issues of mental health to the limelight. A lot more people are aware that this is a very common issue. In the same light, it has also promoted a lot of nonsense around mental health and promoted that nonsense as though it is fact. Because one of the other things that social media does is that it thrives on numbers. So the more people that agree with a particular thing, the more valid it is. So even if that thing is intrinsically nonsense, if 1 million people agree with it, then the assumption is then it has to be a fact, right? Incidentally, that's not how facts work. So the fact that so many people are saying it doesn't necessarily mean that it is correct. And that's a challenge when it comes to information and misinformation on social media, being able to discern what is fact, what is nonsense. When it comes to the health sector, why that is particularly important is believing in nonsense and putting it into practice could cost you your life. So in general, I advise people to stay off of social media when it comes to making medical decisions. You can get general information, you can argue generally, but if you want to decide for yourself, it's best to consult a medical personnel and have a conversation with them, including when it comes to mental health. That is one. Two is dopamine. We hear a lot about it. So let me quickly explain what dopamine is. This is your brain, my hand, okay? I mentioned how the brain develops. The first part of the brain that develops is this part of the brain that I'm using my thumb to do this. This is the front of your head. You're looking that way. This is your spinal cord, all right? So this part of the brain inside here, all right, is the oldest part of your brain. And in there is where you have the majority of your dopamine systems. Now, why? Dopamine is essential for your survival. There are things that you do from when you are born, and when you do them, dopamine is released to make the brain feel good and keep doing them. So the concept, so for example, you eat food. You whine, you cry really loudly, someone sticks a breast in your mouth, you drink, dopamine is released. Next time you feel that feeling in your tummy, you start shouting really loudly. So dopamine is very critical for habit formation because it rewards the habit it wants you to repeat. All right? Now you go on social media and someone says something and you are very annoyed. Then you comment and the person abuses you and you guys are going at this and you are annoyed the entire day. Again, the brain is going through all of this because it assumes, so it's under so if you follow it, it's inside behind number 2 there somewhere. It's around here, inside here, okay? Now, you follow all of this rubbish, and I call it rubbish because whether you win or lose that argument doesn't change the price of your rent, right? But what happens is you become a lot less adept at managing misunderstandings with the person who is actually important to you. Yes, you're wondering, how does that happen? You go on social media and you build a habit of how to treat people who talk nonsense. So I know how I don't take nonsense. If I'm online, I see any of this rubbish, I shut it down immediately. I know how I answer them and they answer them. So if they say, I was about to say APC is the winner, then I remembered where I'm, calm down. If they say something, I'll say your father, they'll answer your mother and all of that. And you're very good at it. Everybody knows you as a social media warrior. Incidentally, it means you are very terrible in your real life interaction with people and having misunderstandings. One essential skill we all need is how to manage conflicts. Not on social media, where it doesn't matter, but in real life, where if I said to you APC is the best, and you said to me your father, there may be consequences. Here and now, like not even the one that you just off your phone, the consequence go off. Like here and now, there will be consequence. And so what you have is people who are functional in a cyberspace that is irrelevant, more functional in that space, and functionality there is you're getting a lot of likes, you're getting a lot of validation, you're getting a lot of well done, but are dysfunctional where it matters. We talked about remote work. So it's the same setting, a cyber setting. You get an email from someone who should be your colleague, who is in a virtual space, and then you jump on and respond like you're responding to a Twitter misunderstanding. You go to work the next day and all your signings are disabled because you have been sacked. Because you do not talk to colleagues that way. And so what we find is a lot of young people with very poor social skills in real life. Now, the way, like I said, to build social skills is to interact with real human persons in physical form. And that we need to, so the more time you spend interacting with what may not even be a real person, the less time you are spending. And one is going to be built at the expense of the other. So that's the other thing with social media. And constantly being under stress, emotionally or physically, is bad for the organ that is stressed, the brain. Constantly being annoyed by something that, to be very honest, at the end of the day, if you turn off the phone, it doesn't matter, is bad for your brain. That's for social media. The third thing is we all need to also understand that the things we put out there on social media, especially for those around us, could inadvertently shape how they perceive us. And maybe it's a persona that I have there because I'm trying to build followers and all of that. But then because this person next to me assumes that that's the real me, it will affect how we interact with each other. I am not an advocate of banning social media. The same way I'm not an advocate of banning power bikes. I hate them, they're very noisy, they're very annoying. But I think people use them responsibly and makes their life better. So at the end of the day, I don't think there's any child in this room. You're going to have to decide how best you make use of it.
Okay. I have three more questions, and then we would open up to questions. But before I ask my last three questions, I have another question from the internet. And the question goes, can young people with still developing brains do anything at all to speed up the process? Do life experiences and maybe exposure help, or does, I read the verbatim, but does, yeah.
No. For the gentleman over there, let me ask, did you hear the question? Can you speed up the development of the brain? So I'm asking you in particular, I don't know why, well, maybe I know why. Assuming you wanted to have a baby in 1 month's time, instead of in 9 months' time, how could you get it done? What if you impregnate 9 women? So the fact that, but 9 times 1 is 9 months, right? Right? So that means in 1 month's time, I won't have a baby. What will happen is that in 9 months' time, I'll have 9 babies. That's exactly this. You can't speed it up. And everything you do to attempt to speed it up will create a lot more complications when the time that it is supposed to be there comes.
Awesome. So my next question is around sleep, right? Because again, there's this idea that the less sleep you have, maybe the more functional you are. And lack of sleep can be addictive in itself. But what role does that and, all the screen time, play either as stressors or or direct rewirers of the brain, if I may use that term? Like what role does that play and what should people be doing?
Sleep is one of the most important things that you can do for your brain. It is an essential thing, an essential process for the brain. There are many, many, many things that we know that the brain does when we're asleep. There's a lot more we don't even understand, but we know that the brain is intensely busy, sometimes even more busy than when we are awake, when you are asleep. I'll give you an example. Has this ever happened to you where something was dropping, you weren't looking at it, and you caught it? Has it ever happened to any of you?
Yeah.
Something was falling and you just caught it, you didn't even realize, and then you thought to yourself, oh, she X-Men. and then you actually started to believe that you may have superpowers. No, it's not superpowers. Do you know why? There's something called proprioception. Proprioception. At any given time, your brain is actually acutely, unconsciously aware of where every part of your body is. You are not consciously aware of it. So your brain knows where your back is right now. And until I said that, you probably didn't even remember you had a back. So when that thing is falling, your brain senses and sees it before it actually registers in your consciousness. And it catches it without bothering to register any of that in your consciousness. The reason for this is, even when you are not conscious of what the brain is doing, it cannot afford to stop working. And a lot of times, consciousness is a distraction from the work that the brain needs to do, which is why at some point, it shuts the consciousness down, basically saying, I bet just shift a bit, let us work. Some of the things that happen during sleep is memory consolidation. It moves things from the temporary folder, this is where I want to sound like a tech person. It moves things from your temporary folder to your permanent, say you have permanent folder, to the hard drive. Anyway, you get what I mean. It moves from short-term memory to long-term memory. It does association. The other thing it does is that it cleans up the brain. Think of your brain. There's this skull that has that thing inside, and there's fluid that bathes it, keeps the temperature down, washes and all of that. It literally washes itself when you are asleep. Sometimes the dreams you have is because it's piling away rubbish and trying to sort it. So you are seeing things that you may not have resolved, just temporarily pass through and this, and as it is sweeping it out. When you deprive yourself of sleep, you actually deprive the brain of what it needs to get real work done. And that's not a flex. Ooh, and for people who have the genetic tendency towards a mental illnesses, that's a shortcut to coming down with an actual mental illness. And that's why a lot of people who go through sleep deprivation as a torture process end up with a mental illness.
So sleep. Yeah. So I mean, one other thing, and yeah, this is probably the last question I'd ask, and then maybe we'll wrap up after this and take some questions. But one thing that's also big, I mean, we young people, but also emphasized, in tech or in tech spaces, is the idea of resilience, right? The idea of grit. But tech is also like one of the places where you face a lot of failure. Your program doesn't run, something doesn't align when you're designing it, and it gets frustrating. And it seems to me, I might be wrong, but it seems to me that, the definition of resilience as it exists today is basically telling people to tough it out, right? What's a better definition of resilience, and what are the things that young people in tech should be thinking about when they're thinking about like how to deal with these sort of like failures and high pressure environments and stuff on a constant basis?
I like there's this saying from a group, a very popular group, that says that there needs to be a shift for a lot of people from the shift needs to be from where it currently is to learning how to live life on life's terms. Sounds very simple, but when we understand that life is not going to adjust to suit us at any point in time, we have to adjust to the terms that life hands us. That, I think, is what resilience is all about. First is understanding what are the terms that life is throwing at me. What does it require that I learn? What help does it require that I get? What new skill do I need to build? What new this do I need to have? And a lot of times we may find that the things we need are not inside of us, they're outside of us. So how do I ask for that? How do I get support for those things? Resilience is not a passive inbuilt process. It is, Pablo, I'm about to use a word he told me to use. It is a collaborative process. What I mean by that is to build resilience, you must be able to have functional social interactions, functional, helpful social interaction. So when you get that blow, someone needs to help you up. And that someone is often not going to be yourself. The idea that getting up is always going to be just you by yourself would probably keep you down longer than you need to be down. I don't know.
I mean, I think that's fantastic. So I would pause here. And my last question is just like, what would be your parting piece of advice? But let's hold on to that and ask the room if there are any questions that we can take before we wrap up. Yeah, two questions, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
No, wow. So I think we should just take all of them.
Yeah. Yeah. So we would, I mean, so there's this thing that usually happens, like after this, like people that don't want to ask questions would wait till we're done and then they'll come. So I want to tell them that he will not be around after we finish. But there are 7 questions. Any more questions if you didn't raise your hand the first time? No. So 7 questions. Let's start with the lady.
Slow down. Okay.
Yeah. Second question. There's another lady. Yes. Mature.
Just wait, like, and if you are in the state to make decisions, like, what do you do in that situation? You just wait till when you're ready.
Okay. Okay, I really like that question.
Yeah. Do you want to take them in batches or you want to take all at once?
I'll take all at once.
All at once. Third question. Yeah.
So why is there very little data on mental health / mental illness?
Very good
Why is
question.
there?
Very little
Very
data.
little data on
Very good question.
mental health / mental illness in Nigeria.
Okay. Fourth question.
Is there a connection between how fast or how slow people learn with respect to the dysfunction they may have gone through in the early stage? Like, we're talking about arguments between parents and parents. Is there a way for the tech community to understand these two failures with respect to people picking up tech skills?
Okay.
Fifth question.
Okay.
So how can you tell that you're having mental health issues?
How can one tell? Okay.
Last question.
From addiction. Okay.
So can energy gain addiction, that's like double addiction, can it be transferred from what it is to something better?
Okay. Okay.
What's the last question? Sorry.
Can the energy from developing addiction be transferred to something more
Okay.
productive? Yeah, so like instead of
Yeah.
drugs, move to something better.
I can refresh if you want.
Yeah.
So the first question.
Can you
was
can't
there an
speed it up, or
executive-
can you
Yeah, can it slow down?
Yes, so you can't speed up brain development, but yes, you can slow it down. There are a lot of things that could slow down brain development. Obviously, other mental illnesses could slow down brain development. Nutrition can affect brain development. There are a lot of things that can affect brain development in a negative way. While you can't speed it up, you definitely can slow it down. The age of pregnancy would not necessarily, I mean, it would obviously slow it down a bit because the requirements during pregnancy are very heavy. You're carrying a whole different person in you, so you're eating for two and all of that. But it doesn't necessarily stop it entirely. The younger a person is when they become pregnant and have a baby, obviously, the more it affects how that functions, the decisions you make, and all of those things. You can't speed it up, but yes, you can slow it down. The question about, do I just wait till I'm 26 to make the decisions that I need to make? If you try it, you'll be dead by 26. So no, obviously, because like I said, you live life on life's terms. You make the best decisions you can at the age you are. And you learn from the experiences that come from that, which means not just the good experiences, but the bad experiences, the ugly experiences, and the boring experiences. That's actually part of how the brain develops, the experience you get from the stupid decisions that you're making. I am not encouraging making stupid decisions intentionally. Make the best decision that you can and learn from the outcome of that. Why is there so little data on mental health in Nigeria? This is something that really, really annoys me. Really, really annoys me. You won't, and you would find a lot of very, very small data or research with maybe 30 people or things like that that are very, very almost borderline nonsensical. However, in December, we're doing a household survey. The Kaduna Bureau of Statistics and my agency are doing a household survey that includes mental illness, mental health, and drug use, so that we can have some sort of statewide data that we're working with as the base of our survey. So please, if they knock on your door, answer them. They're not Jehovah's Witnesses, they're KBS. Yes. So please answer them and tell them the truth. Don't skew our data so that we know what is actually really going on. Yes.
Solving this problem. So where do I go to ask questions, to get data?
Wait, hold on. You want to develop like a website?
I really want to get data. And if I want to go...
Okay, so hold on. That thing you want to develop is for free, ba? No. No. I mean, it would help to determine what I will answer you next.
My intention
Is to help people, right? So it has to be free. Come and see me. Just come to the office. So whatever you need, I'll give you. As long as you build the site for me for free. Naomi will tell you the details of how to find me. She'll even bring you. Thank you so much, because I've been looking for someone to volunteer this. Thank you so very much. Please, let's give him a round of applause. So all through next week, I'm available. Just call. I would make out time. Even if I'm not in the office, I'll run just to meet you. Thank you. Because it's so expensive, and I'm glad you realize this and you're doing it for free. Okay, so before he changes his mind, I'm done with that question. How would you know if you have a mental problem? The easiest way to know is you would recognize that you're not yourself. This thing, whatever it is that I'm feeling, I'm thinking, I'm doing is not what I would normally do. And it persists. Like I said, it's been going on now for 3 days, for 1 week, and I can't find any reason why this is happening. Stop at that point, come see us. Okay? Addiction.
Yeah, is there
Is there really any coming back? I am happy to announce with all the certainty that I have that yes, there is. Addiction is a fully treatable condition. There is no cure, but recovery is possible. And what is recovery? Recovery is essentially a person with this disorder or this disease can live a normal, functional life, and you would never be able to tell that the person has addiction. Just like a person with diabetes can live a normal, functional life without you telling this one has diabetes. It is not true that there is no such thing as recovery. That's a lie. I'll tell you something interesting. I met a lady who has been clean from crack cocaine for 45 years. And the reason why I thought it was funny is because she was making a presentation about addiction and talking about how she's an addict. But she has not used any drugs for 45 years. At the time, I wasn't even up to 45. So if I had met her when I was born, I would never have known her to be an addict. But she knows that she has this disorder. And the day she decides, make I try and see if it has gone, she'll be back to square one. But other than she telling you, you would never know. Just like, and I'm not comparing these two disorders, I like to say this because of the group that I'm talking to here. Are you people aware that someone who has HIV that is on treatment is safer for you to have unsafe sex with than someone who doesn't know their status? I'll say it again. I know, yes, hold on. I know all of you are virgins, so you don't know what I'm talking about. But listen to me now carefully, right? If someone has HIV, they are on medications, right? And then you have someone else who doesn't know their status, and you had to pick one of these two to have unprotected sex with. Pick the person with the HIV on medication. Do you know why? When you are on medications for HIV, you cannot spread the virus. I'm not giving any new ideas. I'm just telling you this. So I say this because hold on. I say this because in our heads we often think that we can tell when someone has HIV. What I'm telling you now is that someone who is on treatment for HIV may even be healthier than you. Similarly, someone who has addiction that is well managed may even be better than you are. Maybe that person that you are saluting in the morning. So yes, there is coming back, and the coming back is not even going back, it's going forward. It can be treated. Can we move the energy from addiction to something positive? We can build habits, but addiction is a disease. What we can do is, before it becomes addiction, we can intervene, and that requires professional assistance. If you think that you're drinking or using any drugs too much, right, and you try and stop and you can't, you probably need to see someone. All right? I think that's the best that I can come up with for that.
Yeah, so, two more questions. Pablo asked about, whether there was a connection between how fast or how slow you learn with your experience growing up.
Pablo, there's a very big problem we have in this part of the world with learning. And the problem we have is a lot of what we know about how people learn, the pace of learning, and what qualifies as quick and slow is what we were given by the British and their assessment of us from a point of inferiority and superiority. That's a fundamental problem. We have this challenge in our educational system. You see that a lot. We have a particular way of teaching and assume that everyone has that particular way of learning. And if they don't learn that way, they are slow or fast. The pace of learning has a lot more to do with the method of the teaching than it does about the quality of the brain. But yes, when a person has any form of issues with their brain, it makes learning slower. But the fact that someone is learning slowly does not mean that they have a mental distress or a mental disorder. It may just mean that that method of teaching is not how they learn. I'll give you an example with myself. At a particular point, I was certain that I will never be a science student because the 3 courses I hated the most in my life were biology, chemistry, and physics. And I knew for a fact that if I ever get a chance of taking an exam in these, I would fail it. I switched to a different context, and these became the first time when I heard I was the highest scoring student in these courses. I thought maybe something was wrong. It was the way it was taught. And we have a lot of kids that go through that. They just don't learn the way the British said that we're supposed to learn. And we don't research how best do we. I mean, how do you take a kid from Nari, no offense to Nari, right? How do you take a kid from Nari and teach him about ABCDE concept? And is it exactly the same way that a kid from Malali would learn? We've never bothered to look into those things. We just assume that what we were given is how we do. So the teaching learning thing, yes, it could be because there's a problem, but it could also be that that problem is from the teacher, not the learner in that instance.
Yeah, the final question was that if you were perfectly okay and you started being giving drugs that are administered to people,
Yes.
yeah.
Lady, have you tried it? Have you ever tried taking a psychotropic drug? A part of me wants to say try, but don't, please. No, don't. I happen to be one of those people that does stupid things. Remember I told you now, when I was young, my brain was not developed. If you take a psychotropic drug when you're normal, you would have one of the worst experiences of your life. If you want to try me, don't say you learned it here, but I'm telling you, it will not, they are not even drugs that make you feel high. They will not do, there's no upside to it. It is not a pleasurable experience at all. It will not make you mad, but it will make you swear you will never try it again. But for people who have that mental illness, have you taken anti-malaria when you weren't ill? You have not tried it? Who has taken anti-malaria when you didn't have malaria, just to see what it's like? Did it give you malaria? When you take medications when you don't need them, all you do is stress your liver and your kidneys. It won't give you the illness. But please don't try it. I have a very bad feeling. Please don't try it. Don't try it.
Yeah. So, I mean, that'll be all for the questions. Do you have any parting thoughts, any final words, anything to wrap up everything, anything that we may not have covered but you think is important for people to know?
So the one thing, I've not had the chance to say this, but one of the reasons I was happy to come for this is because I'm very, very, way back in the day when Collab was still near my house, and they came here, I've always
We're
felt...
still there, by the way.
I know, now I still pass you people. And when they were coming by to raise money to buy a transformer, Ola said, Collab is there, they should pay for it.
So he was the one.
Shit,
Now we know.
Did I just snitch? Anyway, I've always felt some sort of attachment to this place. And to be very honest, I owe you guys a lot. And I'll tell you why. The lady over there knows the details, and I'm sure you hear about it. There's a lot of free work that you people have been doing for me. Naomi, we agreed that I can pay in Puff Puff. That was our agreement, so don't take that. But I'll give you an example. If you see the logo of Katsamsa, right? Has anyone ever seen the logo? Okay. Look it up, Katsamsa. That logo was designed here. I don't know who the person... No, don't point him out now because I'm owing him money. The logo was designed here. What again? I can't listen. They choose recovery signs. Have you seen those choose recovery billboards and all of that? Have you seen it? It's here. Someone here designed that. I've paid that person, so I don't mind seeing the person. There's a lot that you guys have done. There's a Kadbusa app that all the staff of Kadbusa sign on to the app, and when they want to see a patient, do screening and all of that, wherever you are, they have it on their phone. It was built here. I've also paid that person. Don't give me that look. But the point is, there's a lot that we do in the agency that requires the skills that young people like you have, or requires your willingness to offer yourself to do stuff, or your interest and your ability to learn. When you get to our age, I don't know how old he is, but I'm sure he's old, you find that people your age are less interested in hearing us talk. They want to hear people like you talk. And a lot of you come by the office and say, what can we do to help? And sometimes the most you can do is just be trained to help someone like you when they face the same problem. And communities like these are always very willing to do that. And I'm very, very grateful for that, because I don't take it for granted, because I know a lot of you are crazy and going through all sorts of things. So to offer to help in the middle of all of that, I think is commendable. If there were many of me, we would clap and it would make real sound, but that's from me to you, right? Number two is, I also feel like there's a lot that you can do differently than has been done before you. One of them is the data, the statistics. One of them is the learning models. How do we learn about these things differently? But the most significant one is, how do I think about the issues around people with mental illness? And how do I change the way I personally interact with people when I feel like they have a mental illness? To be honest, once you make that commitment to do differently, you make my life so much easier. And it's not really about me, because as an old person, I have a short time to be around and then I leave. But then you make your world so much more livable. Whatever thing that I've said to you in theory, you're the ones who put it into practice to the point where it makes your world different or worse. That's where I'll leave it.
All right. Okay, so thank you guys. Oh?
No.
Yeah. Thank you very much for coming. I hope it was useful. Did it make sense? Yeah, okay. Enjoy the rest of your day. Do not be freaked out that you might not be okay. It's okay not to be okay. Just talk to a professional. We actually do have, and maybe David, you can put them up. We have like a couple of contact numbers for their agency, but also a couple of helplines that you could call if you feel the need to talk to someone. Please do. And I mean, if there are people around you that you have, close bonds with, you should also, at least keep them in the picture, help them. They might be the one that would give you the encouragement that you need to self-repair. One of the reasons why we're super big on community is just because we know that by design we're supposed to be social beings. So we try and emphasize that part of life as much as we can. So if you've been a lone ranger, please connect more with people. It's for your own good as much as the next person. And yeah, thank you very much for coming, and see you the next time.